This is Damon Fordham, adjunct professor of history at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm going to talk about the event that led Africa into freedom and independence. Back in 1885, Berlin, Germany, Otto von Bismarck, the leader of Germany, called the Berlin Conference of the leaders of Europe to gather there and divide up the African nations among themselves. Now, as they did this, there was one thing missing from the Berlin Conference. There were no Africans to give their consent to any of that. So that led to the colonial period. And one of the things that led to, there was something that led that was very important to the end of that. In 1945, George Padmore, who was a man from Trinidad who was living in England at the time, he called for the Manchester Conference, also known as the Fifth Pan-African Congress, for the black leadership from around the world to gather together to throw off the chains of colonialism. So among the people, there were 200 delegates that showed up from all over the world. Among them was Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, the great scholar from America, Mrs. Amy Jacques Garvey, who was the widow of the great Jamaican leader Marcus Garvey, who dreamed about African independence. There was also Kwame Nkrumah from the Gold Coast, which we now know as Ghana, and Jomo Kenyatta of the nation of Kenya in East Africa, among many, many others. Ms. Jacques Garvey spoke about the need to put black women's issues on the table. W.E.B. Du Bois said that when these nations became independent, don't be surprised if they make mistakes, because all nations, when they get their independence after a long time, make mistakes, but to learn from those mistakes and to make things better. And the African leaders also chimed in for their desires, and they all agreed that they would support other nations around the world in their fight for independence, free from colonialism, as well as make their own plans on how to set their countries free. Well, it worked. In 1957, Kwame Nkrumah led the liberation movement that made Ghana free from England. Jomo Kenyatta, who also attended, helped liberate his nation of Kenya in 1963. Jamaica became independent in 1962. And by the end of the 70s, the vast majority of African nations became independent. And as a matter of fact, Du Bois, late in his life in 1961, he was an exile from the United States. And Kwame Nkrumah invited Du Bois as his house guest. He stayed in a little bungalow. And Du Bois lived his last 2 years there working on Encyclopedia Africana before he died there in 1963. And when I was in Ghana back in November, my group and I managed to visit the place where Du Bois died. So the point of all of this, ladies and gentlemen, is this. These people had this goal of independence, and they came together and worked on it. And what's really important about this is Dr. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey were very bitter rivals, but yet W.E.B. Du Bois and Garvey's widow, Amy Jacques Garvey, they put aside their differences and came together for the greater good, and it worked. And if they could do that then, you can do it now. This is Damon Fordham.